Welcome everybody. My name is Michael Farman. I'm going to be talking you through the enhancements around search with the forthcoming 5.0 release. There's various other Alfresco people in the room, including Andy Hind. Andy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Hind. I've been at Alfresco for a long time. I'm a founding engineer. I've been working on search for almost all of that time, with bits and pieces in between. I'm not going to do most of the presentation. Mike's going to do most of it. I'm just saying hello. So don't panic that you can't hear me. If you want to wave at me, I will shout louder and louder until you can. Okay? That's fine. So the other things I get involved with are the CMIS TC. So if you've got questions around search or CMIS stuff, then catch me in the experts bar elsewhere. Today I'm going to answer the questions about the back end and stuff and butt in if I need to. And Mike's going to cover most of the stuff. So over to you, Mike.
And just to add, there's a couple of other engineers dotted around the room as well. Some of the guys who worked on the user interface pieces for search as well. So we've got quite a few people here who can help answer questions. So just in terms of the agenda and what we're going to run through, actually before I do that, I'll just check. Can you hear at the back? Is there speakers working? Move this up a bit. Is that okay? Okay, so I'm going to basically split this up into two sections really. First of all, we'll talk about the changes that are being made server-side, and I'll go through some of the background as to the history and how we've got to this point, changes to the schema, what the implications are for performance and new functionality, a little bit on the administration and what Solr 4 provides in terms of administration UI. And then we'll go on and talk about some of the end user features and go in a little bit more detail into some of the things you may have seen this morning in the videos from this morning. And then I'm going to try and keep some time for demo and Q&A at the end as well. So we've got a lot to get through. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the server-side changes. And something that I've been asked a lot is why has it taken us so long? So we've been, Solr 4 has been out for quite a long time now, and we have been working with Solr 1.4 up until the new 5.0 release where we're moving to Solr 4. Basically, just so you got a little bit of background on this, what happened with the Solr version numbering is it did jump a version, or a couple of versions when the Solr and Lucene projects merged. So they actually went straight from 1.4 to 3 and then went from 3 to 4. So the version numbering is not kind of very linear. When we originally started the work to include support for Solr, 1.4 was the shipping version of Solr, and we started that work, and we were probably 6 months or so into that project, something like that, I believe. When a newer version of Solr came out, and that presented us with a problem, which was because of the changes were so significant, it would mean that we'd have to throw away a lot of the work we'd already done, and we decided not to do that. So we stuck with 1.4 for a little while, and with 5.0 release, we're going to be moving to the latest version of Solr, which is 4.10 or 4.10. It is a major change. It's the whole kind of underlying schema, APIs, etc. have changed significantly between 1.4 and 4. And what it does mean is it will require a reindex. And that's one of the other reasons we've taken our time in terms of doing that upgrades, because we know that this will be something that people will have to go through, and it will take some time and effort and resource to actually go through that upgrade. So that's kind of why it took us a while to get to this point. The good news is with 5 we are on the latest version, and it does mean we'll be able to iterate now much more quickly. Now we've caught up with that. So Solr 4 introduces a whole bunch of capabilities. So I'm talking specifically about what Solr itself provides. So it has new capabilities around searching. It has faceted and filtered search, auto-suggest capabilities, spell checking, etc., etc. A whole bunch of new functionality. And we'll largely be supporting these capabilities to a greater or lesser extent with a 5.0 release. So in terms of what we're actually exposing, in some way with 5, I've tried to kind of illustrate here. So all the ones with kind of ticks next to them, you will see enhancements to Alfresco's use of Solr in all of these areas. So things like the ability to have make use of faceting, which we'll see in the demo a little bit later on. We are supporting things like auto-suggest and spell checking, so auto-suggestion of search terms as when you're typing in your term, and then also spell checking of the results and the query that was used when generating the results. Solr 4 has some statistical capabilities. We've made sure that the schema changes can make use of those. It does have geospatial searching, so the ability to search based on locations, which we are ensuring that we'll be able to make use of. I'll talk a little bit about what's actually exposed a bit later on. It has date maths, improvements around relevance, but there are a couple of areas that we're not going to be supporting immediately with the 5.0 release. And the two main areas there are term highlighting and Solr Cloud. So Solr Cloud is the Solr term for basically the sharding and replication capability around the Solr indexes. Having said that, what we have been doing is making sure the work we do prepares us to be able to support those things in the future. Okay? So with 5.0, we're not exposing term highlighting the search results, but we're making sure that the index is being built in a way so that we can do moving forward, and similarly for the sharding replication around Solr Cloud. So that will come at a later point, but it's not there right now with the 5.0 release. In terms of the underlying schema changes, there's a lot of detail here which I suspect for most of you won't be that relevant, but those who are familiar with the kind of the internals of Solr and the schema, excuse me, there's been a number of changes really to improve things like performance. So we're using Solr doc values, which are more efficient in terms of memory usage, better performance characteristics. We're using native Solr primitive types, which means we basically have a smaller index, one of the advantages of that. So previously we had kind of some Alfresco specials in the 1.4 use of Solr, and now we're using the native Solr one, so it's a much kind of cleaner support for those. Enhancing around cross-language support, multilingual localization support, which Andy can talk through the details if people want to go into the detail behind that. We're also indexing some additional Alfresco specific things like site short name. So basically, if a piece of content lives within a site context, we have a site field now in the index, which means you can very quickly and easily search for within the site context. Similarly for tags, improvements around path querying as well, around performance evaluation. So a whole bunch of things under the covers, which means that we'll make more efficient use of the index and should be faster and more performant as well. And we'll see some of the examples of that when we get into the demo side of things. Anything else here, Andy? No? Okay. So one of the key changes to the way that the underlying schema works is we're introducing on the Solr side the concept of a document store, okay, or a content store. This is basically allowing us to keep a record of the indexed documents on Solr to avoid us having to go and refetch information that we don't need to go and get again. I'll try and explain that another way. So when we index a node, we'll actually store the fields and the text that have been indexed in a directory or a directory structure on the Solr side. And that means that if somebody makes an update to that node, maybe just changing a property, we don't have to go and fetch the full node's content in order to update the index for that metadata change. And it basically means that there's a lot less data having to be pulled out of the repository for Solr to re-index. Now that might sound like, oh, hold on a minute, does that mean I'm going to have like twice the amount of storage I'm going to need because I'm going to have all of the documents on the Solr side? Well, no, there is an overhead, but it won't be kind of this a one-to-one, because that this kind of cached version of the document is stored binary and compressed. Okay, and I've got a couple of slides time, I think, which calls out some numbers around this. So there is no storage overhead. It's not going to be, the same size as your kind of original Alfresco site repository. So it makes it much more efficient for doing indexing updates. It also means if you need to rebuild your index for some reason, we can make use of this cached version for all the nodes that have been indexed before, which dramatically speeds up the reindexing performance as well. And for the future use, so as I was saying, we're not exposing it to end users through the client yet, but in the future, these cached versions of the text will be allow us to support term highlighting in search results as well. So we'll be using that moving forward. So as I say, I'll share some numbers in a couple of slides' time around that. It's drive data, so if you were to lose this cache for some reason or it went away, you can rebuild it, but it just means it'll have to go and refetch that content again. Okay, so it's not mandatory to have that in order for the index to work, but there's advantages for doing so. Okay, there are some changes on the Alfresco server side around the model. And we're introducing a new tag within the model definitions. This goes against the properties that are defined within the model. It's not mandatory, but if you do tag a property with facetable, what we're basically saying it's an indicator to Solr, a flag to Solr, to say that I want to be able to use this as a facetable search field, and then Solr will be indexing it in a way that makes it suitable for faceting. As I say, it's not required. We would recommend that you do review your models. It will make life easier for you if you use this flag. If you don't, there are fallback rules, and it depends on how you've defined your indexing will affect whether it's facetable or not. Do you want to add anything to that in terms of what the fallback rules are?
Just roughly, if you say it's facetable, if it's possible to use the super fast stuff, the doc values in Solr, then it will do that. If you say it's not facetable, then it isn't. If you don't specify it, then you're really saying it's kind of the old school world. If you ask it to be tokenized as text, if it's tokenized as text, it will be facetable, but it will be funny. If you ask for it to be facetable, it will behave. If it's an identity property, or you've asked it to be untokenized, and that is or both, then it will pick that field and you'll get pretty good faceting behavior. For strings and things, we can't use doc values because you can't do that if you've tokenized the string in there. For the primitive types, it will go doc values where it can. So things like dates and date time, integers, longs, floats and doubles, you can expect to be really quick when it comes to faceting.
So when Andy says funny, he means, for example, if the property is a string and it has multiple terms within the string, if it's not indexed correctly, you'll basically get each term will come back as an individual token in the list of facets. So it just won't make sense to the end users. So as I say, not mandatory. Would strongly recommend that you do review those models as part of the upgrades to ensure that things that you want to be able to facet on, you'll be able to do so. I've kind of touched on this one already. I just want to reiterate that although what we've implemented is designed to be Solr Cloud friendly at some point in the future, so we have the option to be able to support it. That's not formally supported today. Does that mean that you can't use it? Not necessarily, but you'd be on your own in terms of actually setting that up from a support perspective. The good news is that what we're seeing is that performance and the indexing times and those kinds of things are at least comparable with Solr 4, despite the fact that we're indexing a lot more stuff and we're adding a lot more value in that index. It's comparable, if not faster, based on what we've seen so far. There are benchmarks going on right now where we're getting some more formal numbers that we'll be able to share with you at a later date. I've got some informal numbers that I'll share with you coming up. A couple of new capabilities which I think are worth calling out. The first one is date maths. Basically, it means that if you're querying based on date, then you can use kind of relative offsets rather than having to hard code specific dates. So if I wanted everything in the last 7 days, In the old world, I'd have to know what today is. What is today? 7th? Is it the 7th? I don't even know. 7th or 8th or whatever. So I'd need to know what the date is and explicitly specify that, and then what the earlier date was. Date mask basically says just use the date based on 7 days ago, a month ago, 2 years ago. There's a whole set of capabilities around date mask that Solr provides. It's really nice. Makes life a lot easier for doing those kind of range queries. There are some hints around making sure that these results are cacheable. I don't want to get into the technical detail now, but basically you should, what this is saying is you should round things like when you're using now, because it's milliseconds. So every time you say now, it's going to be a different number, which means it won't be cached, which means it will run the full query every time. So if you round the dates for things like now, then it will be able to use the cached version, because it will round it down to what today is. So there's a few kind of best practices around that. Lots of documentation that talk about it, and I've got a link in the thing in the slide here, as you can see, or just Google it. Google Solr date math, and there's lots of stuff there. So that's proving to be really useful. Couple of new kind of terms that are supported in the query language, which I touched on: site and tags. So site, as you can see here, I can say site : site short name, and that will basically constrain the results based on whether it lives in that site or not. Much faster and more efficient than doing the old path-based approach for doing that. Do you want to say anything else about path? No? Okay. All right. So how do these two compare? I mean, how does the old world look and the new world? Well, this is a very informal test that I've run on my laptop. Okay, this is not a official benchmark, but it's kind of indicative of what we've been seeing. So I've got a repository on this machine here, which I can show you later if you want to see the details. It's got 200,000 documents in there. They're real documents, so they're not just files that say test inside. They are actual, real documents with real meaningful text inside. 200,000 documents, 5,000 folders, and the content store, the Alfresco side content store, is about nearly 5 gig, 4.77 gig. So in Solr 4, the index to support this repository was a fraction under 3 gigabytes. Okay. In the new in Solr 4, the index is actually significantly smaller. The main Solr index is about a third smaller. However, because we've introduced this content store, this kind of cache for the index content, that is taking up some space, as you can see there. So what is it, 749 megabytes. So although it is taking space, it is significantly smaller than the content store, as I mentioned, because it is binary and compressed. But the advantage you get in terms of indexing and update performance is well worth that. So if you add those numbers together, it works out about the same. It's about the same number. Now, this does vary depending on the nature of the content that's being indexed. You've got a lot of, if you've got content that hasn't got a lot of text, but it's got a lot of images which won't be indexed, then that's going to affect it. So kind of a rough rule of thumb, and as I say, it will vary, is we're seeing typically like 10 to 20% of your original content store size is required for this document store cache. And there are also some enhancements made in terms of efficiencies for memory utilization, which means that we're using a lot less memory for doing things like joins that we used to do on the Solr side. Having said that, we are using Solr for more things now, like the term suggestion and the spell checking, those kinds of things, which in themselves have their own overhead. So, as I say, it's what we see so far. It's kind of equivalent in terms of kind of sizing, but you're just getting more for the same size, if you see what I mean, in terms of performance and functionality. A little bit about administration, and this is just kind of a bonus we get really from moving to Solr 4, is it has a new interface specifically for Solr that for administrators, and this is proving to be really, really useful. Okay, so lots of capabilities around this to go and browse through your schema. You can go and look at your fields. You can see the terms that are stored within that field. You can run queries, all sorts of stuff that you can get out of the administration tool. And it's proving to be really nice in terms of just kind of being able to inspect the state of your index. Is it still indexing in progress? You run a query and it's not returning any results. You can go and very easily inspect what's actually been indexed to do troubleshooting and that kind of thing. So if you are a developer or an administrator working with Solr, this is going to be your friend. It's really very, very helpful. And we've been making a lot of use of that. Anything else to add to that?
We may add some stuff, some customizations in the future to the admin.
Yeah, so at the moment what we ship here is basically the out-of-the-box capabilities. We are looking at adding some kind of Alfresco specifics into here as well to make life easier for you. We haven't got the details worked out yet, but we can plug additional kind of Alfresco special behavior into here, which again should make life easier for people administering and troubleshooting this. Okay, so that was on the server side. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how this functionality gets exposed to the end users. We saw some of this in the demo this morning. We're making use of it for live search. So this is the ability in the top left-hand corner as you type search results. That will pull back documents, sites, and people. It's a really nice way if you want to quickly just look something up, and you can jump directly from here to go and look at the item that's been returned there. And this is actually live in our cloud product today. So if you wanted to go and play with this, you could actually go and look at it in the cloud. But as far as end users are concerned, we have the ability to make use of what Solr calls faceting and the faceting of the results. Marketing people don't like faceting because they don't think normal people know what that means. So we're describing this in kind of the UI and the documentation as filtered search. Okay, so kind of just a more user-friendly term. And as we saw this morning, this allows us to basically expose from the model metadata that can be used to further drill down into the search results. We do include a configuration page within the app to allow you to configure which facets are available from your index in the search results. It's not hard-coded into configuration. There is a tool, which I'll quickly show you, that you can use to set that up. And that's controlled, so you can define basically search managers, I think the term is. Yeah, so you can define users or groups who are considered search managers, and they have permission to configure the facets that will be shown to the end users. And that can be done through the application tool. A couple of other nice things in here is basically we've got different views on the results. So we've got like kind of the traditional kind of tabular style view, if you like, and also a gallery view. And something that we've been looking to for a while now is actually having actions on those search results. So you no longer have to click a document, go through the details page, decide it wasn't the one you wanted, or then go back to rerun the search to get back to the document list again. All of those actions are now surfaced in the search results, and they are contextual. And what I mean by that is it knows what permissions you have, it knows what actions are permissible on the individual items that are in the search results. So it makes life a lot easier, a lot less clicks involved in actually actioning those things once you've got them. This is the management page that I was talking about. And this is really all about controlling when, where, and how those filters, those facets get displayed to end users. And you can use this to basically configure in or out custom or standard properties. So we ship a number of ones out of the box, things like creator, modifier, creation date, modified date, format, that kind of thing. So the common ones. But if you do have custom models, you can configure those in to be exposed. Or if you don't want our default ones, you can also take those out if you want to do that. And just in terms of kind of some of the other usability features around here, the actual search result page, so the URL that gets formed there is kind of bookmarkable, and you can copy and paste it into, say, an email. The receiving person could click the link and it will re-execute that search, including any facets or filters that have been applied to it. So that's really quite a nice way. It's almost like a saved search, but it's the URL that's saving the search. So that's really quite neat. You can just send somebody a Skype message with a link, and it reruns the query, including all the contextual information around the query, not just the search term. There is as you type term suggestions that are driven from the index. So it will basically, you start to type the word Alfresco, and it prompts you with other terms and phrases that you may want to search for. And spell check is kind of, I think spell check is kind of misnamed. It's really more like it's like term suggestions after you run a query. More like kind of did you mean. So in Google, if you mistype something, you run the query and it said, did you really mean this? You can click on it and it runs that query. Same kind of concept that's available here. Okay, so let's actually, rather than just talk about this stuff, let's actually run some queries. So I'm going to come into the search bar here. So this is a development build as of... Oh, wrong screen. I can see it. Sorry, that's better. Thank you. So this is a development build as of like yesterday, I think, something like that. Andy's now crying. So basically, what I'm going to do is just come in here. I'm going to go to the search bar, and I'm going to run a query, and I put search term star in here. So I'm saying return everything, and it's returned 356 nodes in about 2 seconds maybe, something like that. So I'll do a similar thing. Here, basically, I'm just going to say name. This is really hard to do when you're looking backwards. So name star, basically, this says just match everything that's got a name. So it's kind of similar to just doing star. And you can see it's extremely fast. And that's partly because of Solr 4 and its efficiencies, but also because we've moved a lot of the post-processing, or removed, I should say, a lot of the post-processing results that we previously did. So we've not only optimized on the Solr side, but also on the client side. So decorating these results with information that we're showing to the user is significantly improved, and that's allowing us to render the results much more efficiently. One of the big changes is around permission checks. So you notice here it hasn't cut off the results, hasn't come back and said, cut it off at 1,000 results. And that's because we're now doing all the permission valuation to say whether you have permission to see this or not on the Solr side. And it just makes it lightning fast to do that, rather than having to search then post-process to see what you're allowed to see, if that makes sense. Okay, so there's, actually I don't know if I've got suggestions turned on this one. Oh, I do, okay. So I'm going to come into the search bar, start typing a term, start typing the word Alfresco. So here you can see, driven from the index, it's now prompting me with phrases and that I may want to search against. So let's say we want to search for Alfresco API. We could search for that. Oh, and it hasn't got any. That's because I don't have permission to see it. That's another story. But those terms are, as I say, driven from the index, so it will dynamically give you those terms as you type in here. And then within the results, these actions that we can see, let's find something a bit more interesting. So I'm just going to apply a filter. This is the same filters that we had in the demo this morning. It's just a bigger data set. Is the actions and the results. You may have noticed a slight pause there, and that's because it's dynamically building the list of actions that are applicable against this document, and that's part of removing the processing stuff I was talking about. So we don't actually build the actions until you ask for them. So you return 25 results. We don't have to do a load of unnecessary processing if you don't actually want to action those kinds of things. So that's kind of some of the changes that are going on there. Right, so the other thing I want to do, let's search for Alfresco. Oops. Let's do that. I'm just going to misspell it. So I'll spell it with a Z rather than an S. And this is where it's basically doing the did you mean type suggestion here. So it's automatically, again, just like you'd expect with Google to do, it's automatically search for Alfresco with an S rather than a Z. It allows me to say, no, that is what I really meant. But what it's doing here is saying, I know that you're not going to get any hits, so I'm going to actually substitute it with the one that would actually get you some results there. Okay, so what else should I show here? Configuration. Right, so as we saw, let's just do my carbon query. Okay, so search for the term carbon, 100,166 documents that have that term. Let's narrow that down a bit. So I'm just going to apply some of the filters that we've got here. If I just scroll down actually while I'm here you can see some of the out-of-the-box ones we have, so things like size, when it was created, those kinds of things. So I've narrowed those results down, and the reason that these filters appear is because they've been configured through the search management tool. So I'm a member of the search managers group, okay, so which gives me access to this page, and then from here it's not displaying great on the screen, the resolution's not very high, but here is where I can manage all of the different filters that will get presented to the users, and from here I can add in new ones, change the definition of the existing ones, or maybe even just hide them completely if I don't want the standard ones. So let's say we want to come in here and add a new filter, and I'm going to give the filter ID of, actually I don't think I've got site already. Let's call it Summit Site. So the display name is going to be site. There's a whole bunch of things that I can configure in here in terms of how many hits does it have to have before it appears. So normally you're going to have at least a minimum of one, otherwise you'll get filters appearing that have no documents matching. So normally that would be one, but you could make it higher. Maximum number of filters to display for a particular filter. So for things like the creator, for example, you may not want to list, if you've got lots and lots of creators in your results set, you may not want every single one to be listed. So here you can say, well, how many did you cut off? How many did you display before you cut off, and have a show more link underneath it? So these are a combination of defining what's going to be displayed and how it's going to be displayed. And the key thing I want to show you here is that I can come to this filter property, and this has been driven from the underlying model, and it knows what fields are actually facetable. Okay, so this list is driven dynamically, so you couldn't put something in here that's not facetable. Having said that, that does not mean it will make sense to an end user. Okay, because Solr can't understand how the model's been defined. So you might have that issue that we talked about where you've got tokenization of a string and you haven't stored the string. You'll get it's just going to look funny, right? So that's just one to watch out for, but it does mean that they are actually facetable. So here, if I'm going to the model, those custom ones we just saw, we create a model called DM demo, which is for demo model, and then we've got things like country, industry, region, etc. And that's how we configured in those other search results. What I'm going to do is actually, rather than use one of the model properties, one of the things we have in here is site. Okay, so I talked about the fact that we're now explicitly indexing the document, knowing what site it lives in. So coming down here, I can then say where, I don't know if you probably can't see this at the back, right down the bottom here it says filter availability, and at the moment it's set to everywhere. What that means is that we'll display, as long as your results have something that lives in a site, we'll show the filter. But what you can do is constrain it. So you could say, well, I only want to see this filter capability for content that lives in this particular site. Okay, and the reason for doing that is it allows you to control the context so you don't get masses of filters getting displayed for all your search results. Okay, so maybe, well, this is something that we're actually using internally now, is we have what we call a sales enablement site internally, and it has lots of kind of sales-related documentation, presentations, data sheets, all that kind of stuff that the sales guys and SEs need. And we basically tag that, so based on, is this piece of collateral related to a particular product or a particular vertical industry or a particular market. So we tag all that content, and then we configure the filters to only display for content that lives within the sales enablement site. Okay, so it basically controls that context. Okay, so I think I've done everything I was supposed to here. Let's save that, and then let's do another search. Should we do our star search again? And then we should see if I've done this properly. There we go. So again, don't worry about this one. This was me hacking, which I should have removed. I apologize. Let's take that out. So here you can see that of the results, 100,261 live in the repository. 62 of them live within this sample site, and 33 live in the Summit 2014 site. So I click on that, and then it will basically reduce that list down. So I've now got my 33 results that live in that particular site. And then maybe I want to look at that, because there's a lot of images here. I haven't generated the thumbnails for it, but I'll create the thumbnails for those search results. Okay, so I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to show you from the demo perspective. I've just got the 5-minute warning. So at this point, unless I've missed anything, I think we've got time, about 5 minutes or so to do Q&A. As I say, we do have, wrong screen, sorry. Trying to get the slides back. There we go. So we'll pause now for take Q&A. As I say, we do have a couple of the UI engineers here as well. So if you've got questions on the UI side, we can take some of those. And Andy obviously can help out on the details. So I don't know who was first. Let's start here.
Do you have a notion that you're going to come up with for save searches? It seems like you have it with the URL capability of posting that data or getting that data.
Yeah, it was on, so the question was, are we looking at introducing the concept of save searches? The answer is yes. That was something that was on the original backlog for 5.0. Didn't quite get to the top there. You can use the URLs, and I've been using those quite a lot actually. So basically create just a dashlet and then put the URL in there, give it a label, and it's almost the same thing. Not quite, but
I think it's interesting at some other conferences about enterprise search, there's discussion about shared search.
Yeah.
I think the URL is a much better way of doing the shared search.
right. So, sorry, there was one here. I'll come to you then.
What about paging of search results? How
Pa-
will you display 100,000?
I didn't show that. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's get rid of that filter. Just get rid of the site filter. We'll go back to 100,000 results. So what we've actually, it's going to look better here because of the thumbnailing stuff. So notice as I scroll, those at the back probably won't be able to notice. So I'll tell you, as I get to the bottom of the list here, it's coming up and say show more. And it's using that kind of infinite scroll approach for the results there. That's why you don't see kind of page one of, 20,000. It's kind of infinite scroll as you load down. I think it's 25. Is that right, Dave?
25,
Yeah. So 25 results per page by default. When you get to the bottom of that, it loads the next 25, then the next 25, and then the next like that. That's
Server-side paging.
yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're not pulling 100,000 entries back into the table here. Yeah. One at the back.
You mentioned something about previews.
Previews.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This is actually not just in search results, but we have replaced the previewer. Let's go to this one here. So this is now using. What actually happens here is we're generating a PDF rendition rather than a Flash rendition, and then this is a HTML5 based PDF viewer, and that's why the text is real text, so you can do copy and paste and those kinds of things. So that's within search results and also within the main document libraries. Anywhere where that flash preview was is now replaced with this one here. Okay, this one here, and then I'll come back there.
I've got two questions.
Yep.
First one, in 5.0a, there was some, like the search results were different through the advanced search view, and I don't know if that's been fixed in 5.0. Like if you go to advanced search, you click on search, you go to the old search page.
That's right, yeah.
And that's still there?
No, if you go to search and advanced search, you go back into the previous search page.
Okay.
Just something we hadn't got to.
Yeah. In fact, so we can come in here. So you still do have advanced search available. Should you wish to use it, you can plug in your own search forms, as you could do before. And let's do the search. And as Dave was saying, the results come back into there.
And the second one was, I would be able to maybe facet folder search. Like, I mean, now you've added sites and tags in the index, so that's indexable. But I mean, the folders, at least what the clients mostly want, is that they get a list of maybe 10 documents are in a path of this folder, so they click on that folder, so that's the
Okay,
task.
so
Right.
this is one of the things we've got stuff covered in the index, but we haven't exposed in the UI. So, if those of you who are familiar with how Solr encodes path, they have a schema where they just encode the path. So we do that as well. We do it downwards in kind of by hierarchy position, so 0 and the thing it's immediately above. And we also index it backwards so you can find out where it is, because people actually want to know what folder it is, like you said. So we can do views going down, so this is in the repository, this is in the site, this is in document library, this is somewhere else. We can potentially do the other view up, like display the names of two parents. And we've done that based on name rather than on the QName path, so it's more intuitive. And that will probably cover
End path or path?
whichever one you fancy. Which way around is it? I can't remember. off the top of my head.
Let's try path.
Path isn't the right one. It's end path or
So,
end path will do.
where's that going? Can't see it.
So the answer is yes, the future is covered, but it's not quite here yet.
And are there any plans to?
We haven't even got 5 out yet, and now yes. Yeah, we're going to be looking at that. So a lot of what you'll see at the moment is primarily around property faceting. We've done the scoping around repository and sites, and then I would expect us to look at path-based stuff moving forward. So you can use this, but you would have to do a bit of customization to plug it into the UI to get those paths in there. But if you type a path query into the, using the query language, it will use this capability, and it's significantly faster than it was before. There was a question at the back. Sorry, I'll come back to you. Did we do that question? We did that question. Sorry.
So I feel that I should just remind you now that you could go and get lunch, but I'm going to stand here and answer questions until you're done.
Yeah, that's true actually. So if anybody needs to eat, please feel free to leave. But we will keep going for the others who want to keep asking questions.
About performance, Mike.
Yeah.
It's one question, but with a few parts on it. First of all, do you see you've shown some numbers here about the size of the indexes?
Yeah.
Did you test about reply times and make comparisons with the current Alfresco? Second part of the question is, did you do testing with different users accessing the indexes at the same time? Because it changes your caches
Yeah.
when you fill them with many concurrent users.
Okay. So the question of those of you who may not have heard it was in 2 parts. The first one was how do the relative response times compare between the old implementation and the new one, if I'm describing it correctly. And the second one was, I've completely forgotten what the second one was. What was the second one? Concurrent usage. Okay, yeah. So lots of different users querying and what impact that has on caches and memory usage. And over to Andy.
So at the moment we're actually running the benchmarking stuff where we have something like, I don't know, it's 8 million documents, and we have a benchmarking suite that goes against this and does that. It's difficult to say on the query side, because if you hit the cache, Solr takes no time at all, and it's all Alfresco. And so sometimes you hit it, sometimes you don't.
Feedback forms, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to say that. Please fill in the free feedback forms and put them at the back if you're leaving. Sorry, Andy, for interrupting. Carry on.
So I would say, on the whole, it's marginally faster. Kev behind you over there has done some testing on his few 100,000, and it's marginally faster. We do permissions better, so there's no post-filtering of permissions. We do. We always did post-filtering. We did access. We also do deny now on the Solr side. So most of the time we don't do anything in terms of post-processing, so that's faster. The only caveat I would say though is if you're using RM, you must still do that post-filtering because RM has some extra things that it requires on top. So some of the performance things are much better. Obviously, faceting, if we did try and do that against 1.4, and because of the size of the field caching and stuff, it doesn't really fly. But now that we're using Solr 4, the benchmark machine was using considerably less memory to support the benchmark than it did before. So we've removed some of our caches and even adding lots of filter caches and other things. You know, I've sized the caches so that if you've got 10 million documents, you'd use about 5 gig worth of cache if you filled up all the caches that you had, plus some filter caches and stuff. And before you'd have had to have a bigger cache just to do that in-memory path stuff. So there are lots of wins. The CPU one is difficult to answer because it all comes down to how much you decide to warm and use up your memory and whether you want the latency or not. So it's up to you to trade off latency and stuff there. For simultaneous users, yeah, we cache the overall number of groups and permission enforcement, and that gets warmed. It's at least as good as it was. It's no worse. I can say it's no worse because none of the things have stood out to be significantly worse. But you know, whether we're hitting things that have always been there in Alfresco, it's difficult to say unless we go into both sides at the same time. Did that answer the question?
Let's go this one.
So I've got two questions as well. First of all, is you talked about configuring the facets. Can we configure the range of the facets, like the date ranges or the size, or is it set in stone?
Not through the UI, but you could, using the extension stuff, plug your own widget in there. And maybe Dave can talk to that a bit more.
Yeah, so one of the drop downs you might have noticed was the ability to pick your own UI rendering of it, and there's only one at the moment, which is basically just a simple filter. To kind of go back to what I was saying, although we don't expose some of those specials that Andy's added in, even if you were to configure them in, it would still render something. It's more how pretty it renders them, which is still the issue, which is why we aren't exposing some of them. But in terms of configuring the actual the ranges and things like that, at the moment it's a bit tricky because we do some of the date stuff, we still do Solr queries under the covers, and although the Solr has got the ability to, and will correct me if I get this wrong, to test for multi-gaps between ranges, because obviously we see our ones as being like within a day, a week, a month, stuff like that. It's not possible to do that. It's coming in Solr, but in the version we've got, we've not been able to get any joy out of that. So it's.
You're talking about the
There are two
bucketing.
issues. One is that we show overlapping things. So this week shows today, and Solr doesn't neatly let you do that in terms of their interval stuff. And there were bugs in their interval stuff till very recently that you couldn't have different sized intervals. You could only have a fixed one. So we've stuck with the
Query.
and the query gets cached, and that's fine too. I mean, it is a filter in the end, so the thing is cached, it's not that bad.
So this is for your own properties where you want to define your own bucketing of the
Like for
results,
example, if
right?
I have the created date and I want today, yesterday, last
Yeah.
week, whatever.
Yeah.
It is configurable.
That's not so
I would
easy
say it
to
was
know.
custom. That would be customization.
Yeah, so we have to
Yeah.
rewrite it to understand it. And so the other one is kind of related, is that we have support for faceted queries. For example, if I want facets that are like documents that never got modified, it would be some query in the backend, which is like where the modified date and the created date are the same. And I could get my query like all the documents that never got modified.
So that's a query that you want to run. So you could have a facet query, but we have no configuration for entering a query that is to use as a facet
Yeah,
today,
in the
Yeah.
search bar.
which is
Yeah.
the same as the bucketing answer.
Yeah. So again, you know, you can use the extension mechanism to plug in your own stuff, but you wouldn't be able to do it through the UI today. It's
I
great.
have two questions as well.
Yep.
You introduced live search.
Yep.
It's possible to search for documents, persons, and sites. It's
Yep.
also possible to extend it to search for folders.
Kev?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. We chose not to expose folders early on to try and give what we felt the most immediate. Because obviously we did it very find the most useful and a sometime terms in. And that's one of the subtle differences between the results you see in live search and the results you see in the main search engine you do see in folders. So I think we'll probably have it to extend it to self-serving, which is the right program that Dave was talking about, is to be extendable, so widget set. But I think we'll have this going forward.
Okay.
Just to make it, because then you really will get complete parity between what you see in live search in real time and what you start to filter and drill down on to produce your results as the main search.
Second question is, you introduced the search menu as well. Is it possible to use this for enterprise and community or only enterprise?
It's in both.
You can manage.
Search menu.
Yeah, that's
Great filters.
that's the community as well.
Yep. Tom, been waiting patiently.
I couldn't hear very well at the back. I don't know whether you said it, but I'm thinking about indexing speed.
Yeah.
I think you have a new indexing strategy, which is separating the content from the rest of the metadata.
So
Did you mention that?
no, we didn't. But one of the things with Solr 1.4 is we did it, and that was it. We split it into two, and we had to join them together. And we split it into two so that you could update the path component of it. But it turns out doing that is just as expensive as getting the metadata. So what we do now is we update the document effectively. So we do the metadata first, and one of the reasons why we have a content store is we put that document in there, and then later on we come back and refresh it with the content. So we take the document out, just do the content that it references, and add that back in. So that obviously reduces the load, and that's one of the reasons why overall we should be more immediate in terms of responding to queries about metadata, and just probably about as fast for the content as well. We also track ACLs separately, so we do ACLs in their own right, metadata in its own right, content in its own right, and models in its own right. We put models into one big common bucket now, rather than having a model per
And do they
per
have
store.
a different queuing strategy? I was thinking
They should do, but it turns out that we didn't quite have time to do that, so they have the same definition. It's one of those things that we may manage to fix up before it goes out the door. So they should, yes, they should have, but in that build they don't.
Okay, just this guy.
Would it be possible to start a faceted search from a certain location? Say you browse to a folder about a customer and then start to narrow down the results from there instead of the complete repository?
That's kind of similar to the question about path. Yeah. So there's no exposure of path in the UI in the search results at the moment. So if you want to be able to do,
You can do it at the site level.
Yeah.
That's on the URL, and that's one of the facets that we support. So when we add name path, so Andy's already got it in the index, so we're ready to go. When we add that to the UI, we'll be able to reference
Yeah.
it.
But I think your question was, can you only show it after a certain point in navigation?
Yeah, for example, a user is browsing through his folders. There are 2,000 documents within the structure down this
Within
folder.
in the folder itself, can you just automatically facet on those?
Yeah.
Not today.
no, it's
But
just.
I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, there is
Yeah.
on the backside there is a root node.
Oh, technically it's possible,
Yeah,
but there's no UI to expose that capability right now. But technically, yes.
But if you do search from within a site, the immediate search results you get are scoped within that site.
That's right.
And then you can open and expand together. So it's not full path, but it is
Yeah.
at least to that level. So it's, like I said, it's technically possible. It's not something we're doing at the moment.
How much is this language dependent? You say you do something about spell checking or suggestion.
So the spell checking and suggestion is based on exactly what it found in the document. So if you are typing something in and it happens to match an English completion and you're doing it in French, then you will get completions across all languages. And that may be what you want. Cross-language search and completion is, it's one of those things where we're never going to get everything right, but we have improved things on the search side. Now if you type in a search word, we will also, as well as your locale that you have in from the browser, we'll also guess what locale from the text you type in. So if you type in Japanese characters, we will search the Japanese documents now, whereas previously we'd have just said, we'll just treat those Japanese characters as French or English or whatever. So we've made that a bit smarter, and we've done some of the more standard Solr stuff using ICU folding to do some better cross-language stuff there. So in general, it's got better from those two things. But suggestion, we could do language-specific suggestion, but we don't at the moment. We just put it in one big suggestion bucket. It's kind of possible, but you'd basically just be prefixing the suggestion with a language encoding.
As long as we know what happens.
Yeah, but
there's
you know,
there's no ideal situation.
somehow, if you've logged in English and you actually are searching for Japanese, how do I know that I should be completing in the right place? It's very, very difficult. So you put it all in one bucket and hope for the best.
Is the autocomplete returning results based on what you can see in the repository?
Say that again.
Okay. Yeah. Does the autocomplete return your results based on what you can see and what you're entitled to see?
No, it doesn't. So the suggestion to do entitlement against suggestion would be tricky. It would be possible, if you're concerned about that you've got two things you can do. You can go into the schema and you can reduce the suggestion from 3 to 2 and assume that that doesn't really help you either in suggestion or discovery, which is what it's all about, or you can turn it off completely. And you can do that in the UI. One of the admin options is you can take it out. What we could do potentially in the future is only produce suggestions from public documents, but again, if we did that, the first thing we'd get is, I cannot find the suggestion from my very private document that I can't find, because I can only find it via autocomplete. So you have to live with the fact that there is a possible discovery element into there, and if that concerns you, you can turn it off. Or you can go and tweak it, but doing it based on permissions, because it basically builds a prefix tree in memory and does it that way, it's going to be very hard to actually add permissions on top of that. Whilst it could be possible to a certain extent, you know, you're just basically doing dictionary suggestion by the time you've taken out all the options. And, you know, what does that have?
Do you manage a different version of the document in the search results? Or do
You mean, can you find different versions of a document? No.
It's the latest.
It's always the late. Well, it's the latest one except for content. So, because we've got this metadata and content tracking separately, when you update the content and the metadata changes might happen, it will rewrite the metadata document using the old content until it gets round to doing the content transformation. So you may see the out-of-date content for a while, and that was kind of like a reasonable compromise between finding stuff via content, even though it's a little bit out of date. So the answer is no, except for that case.
I'm getting the. We have to stop. We can. So I'm happy to still take questions, but I think we need to vacate the room in order to do that. So, but.
1 hour for lunch, though.
Okay.
Okay.